What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. Today, Lenny Reed, the owner of Dynomite Diesel Products, is going to be joining us. And I wanted to ask him a few questions about fuel economy. And then also, we've been getting a lot of requests for people they've never bought a set of injectors before. And I wanted to have Lenny tell us what are three things that you need to ask any company before you purchase injectors, whether it's for a truck that you daily drive with or something that's high-end performance, race truck, sled pulling, something like that. So I wanted his opinion on what to ask, and then also get some updates from him. They've been really busy at Dynomite Diesel Products with a lot of cool innovations, a lot of cool new things. Before we get to it, though, I want to give a shout out to a couple of our sponsors. First is Amsoil. They're going to be joining us for a series of new episodes this year. We have one coming up. So if there's things that you guys want to know from Amsoil, whether it's about engine oil, transmission fluid, coolant, any of the products they have, make sure and send us a message. Drop a comment on YouTube. We're always checking those things. Or you can head on over to our Discord. You're going to see a link down below for that. It's completely free to join. It's a really cool place to be able to interact with other diesel podcast fans and get opinions on your truck build, parts to use, or if you're trying to troubleshoot things, if you're just, fighting a problem on a 6-liter Power Stroke or 5.9 Cummins or 6.7 Power Stroke or LBC, LLY, anything like that. Got a really great group of guys that are over there. There's lots of really cool builds too that you guys are working on. So make sure to head on over there. If you'd like to be even more involved with the Diesel Podcast, we're going to have a link down below to our Patreon, and we price the tiers. They're as low as $3 a month. But what Patreon allows us to do is to invest in other things to make the podcast better, whether it's audio, video, tons of different things with the website, things that just cost money as far as being able to maintain and improve. That's what that's what your support goes to. So you check out the link down below. If you have any questions about it, you can always send us a message on Instagram, Facebook, or to info@thedieselpodcast.com. We're always checking things and love to hear from you guys. All right, let's get to today's podcast with Lenny and chatting about what Dynomite Diesel Products has been up to. 3 questions you need to ask any injector builder, and what his thoughts are with the rising cost of diesel fuel. Lenny, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I'm excited to chat with you today, as I always am. It's been a busy start to the year. You guys have been busy with a lot of cool new things, so glad to have you back on the podcast. I actually did an episode recently with a truck guy, and he was telling me about his truck build, and he's like, I love Lenny's episodes. I listen to him over and over and over again. When's he coming on next? And I kept saying soon. Well, as soon as today, so I'm sure he'll appreciate it. So what have you guys been up to so far into 2022?
Well, I mean, like you saw that we just worked on that patent, and that wasn't something that just happened. That's been in the works for like 2 years. So, it's kind of the whole thing where like the work goes behind the scenes. Nobody ever sees it, cares about it, pays attention to it. And then when you finally like get somewhere, everybody goes, oh, wow, you just did that. It's like, no, we didn't just do that. We've just been working on that for a while. And even prior to applying for that, like the work that went into it was a lot. You waste a lot of parts, you waste a lot of time, but I can't call it a waste because you're always learning. Even if you learn how to do it wrong, you still learn something, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the patent's good. So just a little bit of technology that nobody else ever thought of or tried. We tried it. And of course, it has its applications where it works really, really, really well. And then it's got applications where it doesn't work at all. So we've learned how to employ that overall average. So it enhances the cold start, the throttle response, trying to get the turbochargers to spool up a little bit. But if you overdo it, then it destroys the top end horsepower and just makes it a bunch of like smoky, nasty mess. So you really got to pay attention to like what you're doing and who you're doing it for. But yeah, it's just another alternative. It's another idea. The reason why I applied for the patent is because I wanted to make sure that if I was doing it, that in the future, that someday somebody wasn't going to mail me a letter saying, oh, by the way, you're copying us. So now you owe us a bunch of money, or you just have to stop. And that was the whole drive and the whole design behind applying for it, because I knew that it was a good idea. I knew that it worked, and I knew that, my customers deserved to have it when it was applicable. Yeah.
What sort of applications do you think it'll apply to? Like, would it apply to really any diesel truck, or is there kind of a certain type of like truck owner that would really benefit from what you may do with that patent?
Well, one of the things that comes to mind is like Scott Birdsall, the guy that ran up Pikes Peak and now is the current fastest diesel vehicle going up Pikes Peak. We used that on his injectors because he comes into the turn, has to get out of the gas pedal, has to leave the turn, accelerate as hard as possible. So response time, turbocharger response time, and exhaust gas temperature control was critical for that vehicle because you start at like 9,000 feet and drive your way up to 14,000 feet. And if you look at like Chuckle's Garage on YouTube and watch the in-cab video of that truck, the camera shoots right through the smokestack. And you can see that there's like a light haze that comes out. And then when it makes full boost, there's absolutely nothing. The whole way up the mountain, you can watch that video just to prove that it actually works. So in his application, where it's not like spinning a bunch of high RPM, it was ideal and it was perfect. In an application like a sled pull kind of a guy, where you're trying to make all your horsepower up top, upstairs, you don't care about drivability downstairs, it's not ideal. In a drag race application, if you've got an injector that's virtually too big, then you can add this to it and it'll help get the thing up on the stall converter and get it spooled up at the line. But there again, if you overdo it, then it destroys the top end horsepower. So you really gotta, it's not a one size fits all kind of a thing. It's definitely like, and we've got some recipes that seem to be, but it's taken us, I guess we've been playing with this idea now for 3 years. So it's taken us 3 years of experience to actually come up with what we've got for data.
Yeah, I remember I had Scott from Chuckle's Garage on, and he was telling us about the injectors and the response, and with the elevation and what he's doing at that race. You know, it was really cool to hear about it. Just, and I remember seeing the videos. There's hardly anything that you see come out of the exhaust.
Yeah, no, it's definitely kind of cool to watch, and that's a video that didn't get a whole lot of traction for whatever reason. But it's a good video to watch. Like, it's an in cab of the truck. You get to see the data logger. You get to see that, out the windshield. It's a fun video to watch. I should ask him if I could borrow that video and then post it to our social media as well. But yeah, no, that's just one application. Will it work for everybody? Nope. Does it work for most street driven vehicles? Yes. If it's a cold climate vehicle, it's absolutely wonderful for a cold climate vehicle. So it's got its things, like if there was one recipe that mastered all engines, there wouldn't be a need for two, right? Like, everybody would just copy that. It would be perfect.
Yeah. You were telling me some more injector stuff before we got started. I think you brought some examples to show, which for our YouTube audience will be able to see some things that you're chatting about.
Yeah, we're always working on new stuff. We're always trying stuff. We're always, monkeying with things and then asking questions in-house, applying them to motors that we get to drive around on the streets and things like that. Like, pretty much everybody in this crew, almost, I think everybody here basically owns a diesel of some sort. So we're always trying different ideas and vehicles, and Matt, and we work him to the bone, just trying to get all the stuff running and keep it running around here. And what we've been lacking on in the past couple of years was having a dyno, because when that was the first tool I ever bought coming into this industry, was a dyno. And then I sold it. Now Donovan Harris has it up at Armor. So we haven't had that dyno on the ground for 2 years now. And I just took for granted how easy it was for me to walk out, throw it down, and then see what it did, actually have a real measured. And I took for granted, because now I'm having to use customers. All right, well, I'm going to send these to you. I want you to dyno them, check data, blah, blah, blah. And 85% of the time, 90% of the time, we don't get the data back. If it runs poorly, we hear about it. If it runs good, never hear a word, right? So that's been a real struggle with our Duramax stuff. We're not really known for Duramax stuff, I feel like. And I finally got a guy that was willing to work with me. His name's Craig McElfresh, and he's really sharp. It's fun to work with him. He's a PPL Duramax guy, so he's big into 2.6 and 3.0 sled pull stuff. He's good at data. I think, and the whole sled pull camps, they're also private and they're also secretive. They don't want to share anything. And of course, when you start giving somebody a set of injectors, you don't necessarily know if you want to give it your A game right out of the gate, because if the guy just takes your injectors and then hands them to somebody else, well, then he's right where you are, right? And if they're in front of you or behind you, they at least know where you're at. So with PPL stuff, since it is such a competitive sport, there's always that secrecy and that privacy, and you don't want to share data from, say, Craig to everybody else. And that's one thing with, like, on street driven vehicles, people don't, like, the average guy on the street doesn't understand that just because you ask for X amount of holes and X amount of liters per minute or X amount of percent over, that does not mean you're getting the same injector as the other guy. I recently got my ass chewed by another guy that was upset because everybody's getting 6 holes. I'm like, yeah, well, it's a hole count. That doesn't mean that everybody's getting the same injector as you, because that guy is extremely good at data and he wants the rate shape to be exactly perfect. So he gets an injector that's 6 holes at this many degrees of spray angle. It injects this much fuel during this much injector on time. But his injector is a lot faster than other people's because he's a lot sharper and he can tune it correctly. Not everybody gets the same injector because they're not asking for it. When they go to the dyno and they start asking me for little tweaks and little tweaks and little tweaks, that's up to them to, I'm just a custom injector builder. I can do, almost anything you ask, but you need to ask for it. Otherwise, I don't know what the heck you want. And not everybody's always going to be happy with the exact same recipe. So it's not my responsibility to teach somebody what to build or how to build it. If they say, I'm here and I need to get there, what are the next directions that I need to take? Then I can show them 2 or 3 different options. But as a custom injector builder, like, I'm just trying to make sure that I give them options on navigating through some of the headaches. Because that's one thing you'd mentioned is everybody gets hung up on percent over and liters per minute. And those are 2 really simple terms. And on the street, that may mean a lot. And to the beginning guy that's learning how to drag race or sled pull, that's a good spot to start. It's not the end game, though.
Yeah, I think when it comes to certain parts of a truck, and it's not just injectors, is it's, if we're not experts, which most of us aren't, we don't understand the whole concepts of it. Like, I've talked with companies about torque converters, and I kind of, in general, have an idea, but I don't know the details of all the things they go into. Same thing with injectors. So I think we fall back to, okay, well, what's the liters per minute or the percent over stock? And then we look for, like, these horsepower recipes that people have done, and they tell us what turbo to run, what percent over stock injector, what this, what that. And then, I've even done that myself when I would, want to drag race or something like that, and I wouldn't have the same result as somebody else. There's so many other factors involved in it that it's like, I just bought all these things and I didn't get exactly where I wanted to go, because it's not just like one setup to, be able to achieve every single goal. It varies so much.
Yeah. So yesterday I was walking through the Home Depot looking at tile and grout and all that kind of stuff for my house, right? And there was a gentleman that hit me up the day before, and he said that he was a customer of Dominic from Starlight. So shout out to Dom for, sending somebody our way. I appreciate it. Basically, Dominic and this guy had been working on this tuning, and they were waiting on a set of injectors. The injector company was basically at a point where they couldn't send him anything that was going to work. So the customer then reaches out to me and says, okay, well, Dominic told me to give you a buzz and find out what you could do to help me. I said, number one, jump on Dynomite Diesel's website, custom injector order form. You fill it out. Tomorrow morning, Skylar and I will go through it, and we'll call you with any questions, concerns, comments, or recommendations. As soon as you fill that out, like, you can tell me for 45 minutes as I'm walking around Home Depot, half-assed, kind of paying attention.
Yeah.
I'm not going to remember all this shit tomorrow.
Yeah.
So if you'll fill it out on paper, when I go to Skylar, and that's the only thing on our mind is those race waivers, we focus on those. We talk about stuff. If there's stuff that we don't, if I'm not 100% clear, he's not 100% clear, we try to go back and look at other people's notes on what was successful and what wasn't. And then we come to that race waiver and say, this is what we recommend. We recommend this because this proved here, this proved there, this proved wrong here. That helps us a lot. And with parts, it's taken us at least 2 years of working on needle valve design, needle to nozzle clearance, and overall just getting blanks that we had. Because when you use like a motorsports nozzle or any brand of nozzle, it came with a factory hole count, whether that factory hole count was 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever, and then it came at a different spray angle. So I'll use my arms as so if this is 180 degrees and this would be 90 degrees, so we'd have like 124 and then we'd have like 143. Well, if you've got 7 holes at 143 from the factory and you're trying to copy 7 hole, but you want them at 124, well, then you've got to shove a rod big enough through that. And you've got basically, about 50 to 60 thousandths of rifle barrel right there that you need to try and blow open large enough that you recreate your entire angle. That's just a garbage way to do it. You get it to where it looks good on the outside, but it looks like shit on the inside. And then you've got 2 spray passages feeding 1 hole on the inside at different angles. I see that stuff all the time. It's garbage. Starting with a blank was expensive. Like, we order them several hundred at a time, and the initial investment was a lot, but the sky is the limit, because we can put 4 holes in there. We can put 14 holes in there, whatever you want, we can do. And we can do it with whatever angle and whatever wire diameter you want. With the new AFM, abrasive flow machining, we're learning. So when we got that machine, bear in mind, this is something that Cummins and Caterpillar and, Delphi and big OEMs use every single day, right? Their media was set for a certain hole size because they're going to run the exact same part 6,000 times a day. So they build a system that makes it very efficient for them to just bust out 6,000 pieces every single day without killing anybody. When we do what we're doing, we're going from 3 thousandths all the way up to, on an average day, 21 thousandths. We can go bigger, but on the average day, 21's kind of our biggest hole around here. So going from 3 thou to 21 thou, trying to get the media to work, it's very difficult. So if you run the part too long, the hydro machining starts to create like almost a heart shape orifice on the outside. Like, it actually physically kind of looks like a heart, which that's not going to give you the atomization and the plume that you want. So we're learning with AFM where our media needs to be, and we're currently on our 3rd or 4th update of media already. And because each time we up the media, we're going further away from what OEMs would normally want or do, or what they were with, and we're getting more into our own custom kind of variation. And it seems to be effective. And I think that we're teaching the company that we're getting the media from, I think we're teaching them something as well, because nobody's ever asked them for this.
Yeah.
Like, it was enough. So they were fine with it. So yeah, and then choosing, if somebody calls me and says, hey, look, I want a 6 hole at 10 thousandths of 1 inch. Man, I don't know where you came up with that number, but if you'll put on paper how much horsepower you're trying to make and what size turbocharger you've got, I will then dictate, like, okay, if this guy's going to run, if he's got just a box SXE 480 and he wants to say 1,000 to 1,200 horsepower, I know that thing's going to be like somewhere in the realm of like 3,700 to about 4,500 RPM. And we're going to want to make sure that at that point, he's down in the microseconds injector on time, 14 to 1,700 injector on time. Anything over that, if he's at 2,500, he needs a bigger injector. And if he's down at like 800, as attractive as that sounds, like getting the injector to make that kind of fuel in that shorter duration, it doesn't really respond that well in most motors. So to tell me you want a 6x10 isn't really the correct way to order an injector. Like, it's basically up to us to start with something that we think is going to be close, And then we adjust the wire diameter within a tenth of a thousandth of an inch on the way up. We finally get the hole size to where it is. We get it to where the AFM moves it about 5 liters per minute, and that recipe will change in 6 months. If you ask me, I guarantee I'm going to throw a different number out there. But today, if I was building a set of injectors for my mom or my own truck, I would target them to be, let's just say if it was going to settle at 60 liters per minute, I would EDM it up to 55 right now, and then I would K factor it to 60. With the media we've got, that seems to be the perfect recipe. As we continue to change medias, that may change, but right now that's what I would build for myself today. And then I would put them in the stand, and then we would see them pump. And if they pumped 350 mm cubed at 1700 at 180, and I wanted 380 mm cubed, then I would start to lean on the rate shape, which would be the if we're looking at like kind of a rainbow shape, it enters very slow and kind of lazy, and then it shuts off very slow and lazy. That's like the rainbow shape, right? And we don't want that. We want something that's much more like a 90-degree line across the tabletop that's flat and then shuts off immediately. We currently don't have a way to measure rate shape on a line like that. So that tool is coming. It's on a boat. It's on its way here. I'm super stoked about that. So that being said, once we get rate shape, that'll be something that we can, right now we're literally tuning those things by ear. Right. And when the people showed me rate shape, the tool, they were like, oh, well, how did you do this? And I'm like, well, you can hear it. And no, you can't hear rate shape. I said, well, I can, apparently. Like, they're like, well, you can't do it twice. So I handed them another injector, and they were like, well, how the hell did you do that? I'm like, you hear it. And they're like, well, there's no way you can do that. And they're kind of right, but they're also wrong. If you don't have the tools, but you know that you build it this way with this recipe, and it sounds this way in the stand, and then you put them in a vehicle on the dyno or on the street, and they respond a certain way or another, you want to modify the way that it responds without changing a bunch of other stuff. You basically change the rate shape. So, because even though if it'll pump 350 mm cubed, but only for a brief window of time at the peak of that rainbow, then who cares? If it'll pump 350 mm cubed all the way across that top being flat of the injection event, that's when you're actually stabbing some fuel in there and things are happening really well. So yeah, I mean, we're growing, and we're spending all of our profit on new tools and technology to try and basically build something for this industry that we've never had the ability to support in the past. And we're growing like crazy, so it must be working.
Yeah, that's one of the things from the episodes we've done and talked about this stuff is the precision and all the things you're working on. Every time we chat, there's something new, and it's something really exciting, whether it's, for the vehicles that are on the racetrack or like Pikes Peak or drag racing or sled pulling, or the daily drivers. And that was something I wanted to ask you, because I know that you have strong, well thought out opinions, and a lot of it recently around diesel has been fuel costs, and it's like this. People are looking for, what do I do to increase the fuel economy, because it's so expensive, and I know it fluctuates a little bit day to day and every week, but we don't know how long it's going to be over $4 a gallon, or some places are way higher than $4. Is how do injectors factor into that, especially with this technology and the things that you're working on, the data that you've acquired and the experience, to be able to deliver that to somebody who's, it's a daily driver, something they tow with, and they're just looking to have or get a little bit better fuel economy as part of, there's so many things that affect it, but just specifically with the injector side.
So for fuel economy, and I feel the pain, because actually last weekend, I took our UCC truck down to Denver, and I was in ATS's parking lot. I didn't even eat lunch in Denver. I turned and burned. So I kept track, used, the same credit card for me to drive to Denver with a UCC truck, pretty light, no engine, turn around, drive back with an empty trailer. I spent $1,550 on fuel. That was a brutal couple days. Like
Yeah.
I'm not, it's a 16-hour drive for me each way. So basically, 32 hours, I spent almost $1,600. So yeah, it's, when you're spending $5 a gallon, it's time to pay attention.
Yeah.
Number one, the smaller the spray orifice to achieve the horsepower desired, the better off you're going to be. Number two, K factor's no bullshit. That's real. If you bought a Chinese injector that's a 5x10 or a 6x12 or whatever, it more than likely has no K factor in it, and it was just EDM'd. So the feed portion, when the I don't know if the camera's going to work very well, but when the needle valve is in the very bottom of the injector, when that needle valve is at closure, it only lifts, we're talking micron, we're talking thousandths of an inch, and then fluid has to squeeze around the nose of the needle valve. So it's got to squeeze around that little guy on the very tip. And as it flows past that needle valve, it's got to spray out those orifices. So if you look at that orifice like yay, and around this area where that needle valve, when the needle valve goes to lift, if this edge is a 90-degree lip, fluid doesn't turn 90 degrees ever. It will always overshoot, and it basically creates a low pressure system right over that 90-degree edge. So even though the outside face of that hole may be 10 thousandths of 1 inch, you're actually feeding it with like 6 thousandths. Oh, okay, well, I'm just going to go to an 8 thousandths hole. Okay, well, now you're in an 8 thousandths hole, you're feeding with like a 5 thousandths of an inch. So with K factor, you create a chamfer and a radius. So when the needle valve goes to lift, it smooth pushes itself all the way through that hole. So if you've got a 10 thousandths hole, you're feeding it with like 13 or 14 thousandths. It's a big deal. So,
Yeah.
We often talk about rail pressure, but nobody ever thinks, and there's really no way to measure it. But nozzle pressure is actually what we should be most concerned about, because whatever fuel pressure is leaving the face of that nozzle is actually what's going to try and burn. So when rail pressure drops, that's measurable. We see it on a scan tool, and we know they run like garbage when rail pressure deviates. But nozzle pressure, if you've got Chinese garbage, that's, we can buy those things for $17.50 each. And we could pedal them, and they would be on the street and they would run. They would never run awesome, and they would never give you optimum fuel economy. It would create a smoky, more powerful truck than you used to have, but it wouldn't be optimum, because especially today, when it was $1.75, $1.80 a gallon, nobody really was too concerned. But apparently people are concerned because in the past, the last week of last month, so that was what, 2 weeks ago now, is that right? Yeah, 2 weeks ago. That last week, we sold well over 100 sets of VP44 injectors in 1 week. And we also did the same with like all the 12 valve stuff. So it's becoming real. People are starting to pay attention. And when you're moving that kind of injectors, watching the warranty rate, the percentage drops, the numbers of warranties go up, because, if you're going to sell 1,200 injectors in a week, obviously something's going to get installed wrong. My guys may have done something wrong. So warranty goes up a little bit. Phone calls go up. But man, you're moving so many bloody parts, the percentage actually drops. So, that's another thing, is our warranty rate is ridiculously low for how many parts that we're slinging. And I attribute that to the tools and the passion. Like everybody in here, I can walk downstairs and everybody's in a pretty good mood usually, and everybody's like kicking ass and having fun. And we employed a new policy just probably a year ago. Cell phones have become a real thing. And listening to, like, say, Darren Hardy, he's just a real estate guy that I listen to on, YouTube or whatever. He's really big on focus. And, if I grab my cell phone and I look at a cat video, the video may be 15 seconds long. No shit, bro. The video might be 15 seconds long, but I've taken my brain away from like what I was just doing. If I was functioning on this thing and somebody, sends me a meme, and I look at the meme for 5 seconds and I put my phone down, where was I? What was I doing with this? And where was I with this? Yeah. So effectively, you just lose like 3 minutes of time over just a few seconds, right? And I saw it coming, and our guys, we get paid off bonus basically. So everybody gets like an hourly wage. And then if the company's really succeeding, then the guys in the shop share a bonus as well. So I recommended to the guys that we left our phones on the lunch table. And I don't care how many times a day you walk out and check your phone, but get your ass out of my injection shop and go look at your phone. If you got to grab Gerber for the baby or grab milk on the way home or whatever, that's cool. Just do it at the lunch table, because I want to know that when you're in the injector shop, you're actually focused on your job. And that has, I would say that helped that decreased our warranty rate by a lot. Just little things inside the company all over.
That's something that I always enjoy listening to you chat about that side of it, because there's there's still the supply issues. Who knows when those are going to end? And then you have this increased demand for whether it's to maintain a truck, upgrade a truck, keep it running, because you can't just go out into a dealer lot and buy a brand new one, or you're waiting forever, like Ford turning off the ordering for Super Duties till August or September, whatever it is. We're all looking to keep our vehicles running. And you had mentioned something earlier about testing products and things in-house, and I know that there's other industries, diesel's probably included in this as well, probably every industry, where the manufacturer will almost beta test out there in the public. And I see it in other types of things where they use their customers to be able to test stuff. And it's like, we don't have the time, we don't have the materials, time is money. We're trying to do all these things. And to see how you've put these concepts together, I know the business owners, the diesel shop owners that listen, just people who run even businesses in other complete industries have told me about your episodes. I love listening to what he does with his crew there, the principles or the things that he tries, because I look at my business and I think, am I doing this the most efficient? How am I encouraging my employees to work the hardest? How am I delivering the best product or the best service that I can? So I always love hearing you talk about that. And then we're comparing it to diesel trucks, which I'm passionate about. So I'm understanding, okay, this is what he's doing with the injectors. This is what he's doing with the media that he's talking about. This is how he's testing this stuff. This is how what he's learning at the racetrack or at the dyno booth or in the machine. It's applying towards this 12 valve or VP44 truck or 7.3 or 6.7 Cummins, whatever it might be. It's so cool to see all that be brought together and produce something that's really, really awesome. And I think revolutionary in diesel, not just with injectors, but the whole thing is seeing you grow with it.
Yeah, it's to me like running the company is a lot of fun, but it's also very taxing. With one thing that I've learned just in the last 6 or 8 months is with me being out and I'm really blessed. I'm super thankful that I'm actually able to afford the time to go out to my house and be there for every little thing, because I'm building exactly my house. Like when we're working on stuff and we start to lay it out, and I'm like, 6 inches over here, 3 inches there, do this in angle, do this straight. It turns out to be my house. It's exactly the way I wanted it. And if I wasn't there day in and day out every single day, it wouldn't turn out that way. Yeah. So first and foremost, like I'm blessed. I'm super thankful and very appreciative I get that opportunity. But when I come to town, which is every single morning because our gym is in our building, and then I have a meeting and then I go to work out at the house. Every single day, I ask everybody in the crew, what's going on in your world? What's going on in your world? What's going on in your world? And we call it the morning huddle. A buddy of mine, Bruce, he's got a company with 250 machinists, and they have huddles every single day. All the different teams have small huddles, and it's 10, 15 minutes, and everybody gets a finger pointed, like, what are you and you doing? And if you go, nothing, you stop. And you ask the guy, what? Because if you're doing nothing and you got no problems, then we really need to probably give you a lot more responsibility, because tomorrow I expect to hear about some shit. And, that way, because there's nobody that you want to pay hard-earned money for not doing anything, right?
Yeah.
So everybody downstairs knows that we're going to have the huddle. They're all going to get asked, how's your workstation? What's going on? Or is there something hanging up in your workstation? example, fuel filters for the test stands come from Europe. So unfortunately, it's just European sizing. It's like basically like a metric, imperial metric is what they call it. So the only way for me to actually build a fuel filter would be to revamp the entire stand. And then we've done that with one of the stands. We actually put a fast pump in one of our stands and it worked out really good. So just yesterday, I sent a text message to Spencer at Fast. I'm like, hey, dude, these are the filters on this. Can you send me a box of these so I don't have to ask you in a few more months? Because we change the fuel filter to stands at least once every 60 days. If your stand takes a crap, you're no good to the rest of the crew. So if you're running out of filters, if you're running out of calibration oil, we're getting to the point where the injectors are pumping so much so fast, it's very hard on these test stands. And the new test stand that we have coming with the rate shape involved in it, that's going to be where all the really big stuff gets built from now on. Because physically it's double in size, like all the lines that feed it and then they receive the fuel. Physically, it's like double that size of the stuff we have now. So in the future, like we're currently like knocking on the door of 3,000 horsepower. I don't know where that stops. If somebody makes, Fleece has now got that billet block running for Derek Rose. If that sumbitch lives at 3,500 horsepower, then we're going to be making injectors that'll make 4,000 horsepower. Yeah. So yeah, we're buying tools that seem futuristic today. 12 months from now, it might not be futuristic. It might be mandatory. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this place, it's exciting because we're finally getting to the end of our dynos. She sent me, basically there's a little gauge that all dynos need. It's called the strain gauge. The strain gauge is made in Austria. And there's this dipshit, his name's Arnold Schwarzenegger. He one day was like, screw your freedom, get your mask on. And then later on that day, like the Austrian was out running around California in his Hummer, smoking a cigar and no mask. I got no respect for that guy. But the problem, and why I bring him into this, is in Austria, where the strain gauge is made, that shut this dyno process down for months and months and months. So since they finally were able to build, they could finally go back to work. That's something about America that, like, we shut down for a bit, other countries shut down for months. Yeah. And they were government subsidized so they could at least live, right? The strain gauge is on its way. It was supposed to have been delivered to Texas yesterday, and the strain gauge that we're waiting on will go into our dyno, and then they can finish building the rest of it so we can get this thing back up and running. Like the dyno building is done. The garage that all of our stuff is going to get worked on, we were supposed to pour concrete yesterday, and miraculously Mother Nature decided that winter wasn't over. So it dropped below freezing and we canceled concrete for a week, and we're going to reschedule for next week. These are exciting days for us because we've got so many projects lined out that we just need a spot to work on them. And I've hired a guy as a manager to do the business daily stuff, because like I say, without me being here, there's been a little bit of, there's kind of a riff. You get one guy that's just all fired up on Wednesday, yeah, and then Thursday is not that fired up. We need somebody here to kind of keep everybody in the lanes when I'm not here. And that way we can be out there doing carb testing and EO testing and just general performance testing at the same time. So I'm really, there's a lot going on in this company. For as small as we are, there's a lot of moving pieces that move really quickly. And I think that's just an attribute to how amazing my people are, really, because I'm not the one doing it all, I promise.
Yeah, I think the organizational part is probably incredibly important, and probably one of the main reasons you're able to do, like you just said, so much, because of the people that you have and then the way that you organize it, so you can maximize the time there, what you're producing. You have all these great ideas, these things you're working on, really cutting edge stuff for like the aftermarket. Like, I mean, even just in general, like you were talking about, hey, these OEMs do 6,000 injector sets a day the same way. They're focused on volume. Well, now I'm going to build however many injectors that are all different, and you got to stay, on that curve and invest in it. Well, who's who's doing these other things, these day-to-day things in the business, and
Yeah.
keeping everything running.
Yeah. So one thing that I do want to mention is inside of like common rail injectors, we've got these needle valves, right?
Yeah.
These are two different ones. You really won't be able to see much, but basically these needle valves, the thickness of that, this is 3.5 millimeters right there. And this one is 4 millimeters. So some of the trucks, common rail 5.9, LB7, LLY, that came with a 4 millimeter needle valve. And then the receiving cup inside the 6.7 liter Cummins and the LBZ on later Duramax, that's all 3.5 millimeter needle valve. So we've been waiting. The first one that we did, obviously, was the 4 millimeter valve. And then once we got the 4 millimeter valve in production, testing, running, we started reshaping the tip. No different than anybody that's ever done like a multi-angle valve job. The tip flow can create or destroy either idle or pre-injection or main injection event. So we had to design a tip that worked correctly for what we were trying to do. Once we finally were like, okay, 4 millimeters good. Now we've got our blank for all the LB7s. We got our blank for the LLY. We got our blank for the Cummins 5.9. Good to go, because we can do all the rest of the work in-house. Like as long as those blanks show up exactly the way they're supposed to show up, then we take care of the rest. Then the next step has been on the 3.5 millimeter valve, which traditionally speaking is the higher pressure trucks, 6.7 liter Cummins, LBZ, and later Duramax stuff. With 3.5 millimeter stuff, the learning curve wasn't quite so steep because we already figured out like needle to nozzle clearance, already figured out the shape and of the tip. So we just recently got our first batch of that stuff in about 20 or 30 days ago. And we've been recently beating up those on the streets, and they're working out really well. So this is game changing, because as we know that we're not going to have a bunch of warranties and we start to turn the faucet on faster, pretty soon we'll have recipes that are going to give you like really good performance for whatever desired level you're at. But it's also going to be like, number one, fuel efficiency and efficiency of the overall combustion process, period, being the first and foremost goal. Anybody can make horsepower. If you don't care how much you spray at it, and if you don't care how much air you throw down its throat, you can make horsepower. But trying to get the motor happy under the curve, that takes a lot more effort. And that's where, your drag vehicle, you pull it up, you stage it, and then you run the thing at wide open throttle. But that's, one in several thousand vehicles. The other several thousand spend most of their time under the curve, and they need to be happy under the curve. They need to be happy, not just at peak power. They need to be happy from idle all the way up, right?
Yeah.
This stuff, the stuff that we're learning with, the Chase Fleeces and, all these guys that are like doing a lot of dyno testing, the stuff that we learn from those guys on the really ultra high end of performance, that stuff carries into daily driven street vehicles pretty dang well. So I'm just excited to be partnered with a lot of the people that we're aligned with, and not just my employees, not just myself, not just my daughter, but everybody else that we're partnered with in the streets that has their own dyno and has their own trucks, has their own engines, all that kind of stuff. And then the sky's the limit. Like Diamond Pistons, those guys are awesome. They do a great job.
Yeah.
You want a custom bowl? Well, let them know. Like in 4 to 16 weeks, you'll have your own bowl. And whether it works or it doesn't, they don't care. Like you just asked for it and they built it. But if you ask for it and it works, that separates you a little bit from the other guys, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. And I think, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I think that's why the the racing side of things is so important, because like you mentioned, what you learn on these high end builds, you're translating into, I'm sure, some of the lessons to emissions testing products and daily drivers and towing applications, and it's so crucial, with that side of it. And Just seeing what's going on. And earlier you'd mentioned, with your crew there is, like listening to them and trying to have like your finger on the pulse of what's going on. And something I like to do with the podcast is listen to not just our listeners, but then just people in diesel in general and conversations I see on different social media platforms. And, you touched on some of the questions people ask, like liters per minute, percent over. But if someone's looking to buy injectors, what are 3 things that, if I don't know a lot, I haven't listened to podcasts, haven't read a whole bunch, but I know I need to buy a set of injectors. What are 3 things I should ask to, a company before I buy them? Or, if it's a dealer or something like that, what are 3 things you think are really important before you swipe the credit card, enter the credit card number, and put them in your truck?
I really think that today, the very first one is, if I give you my money, when will my product ship? Yeah. That's in 2020, in next year, who knows what's today. That's the first question. When's my stuff going to ship? Because more than likely you're buying injectors because you need your truck on the road. And if they take your money, but it's 6 to 8 weeks before you get your truck on the road, well, that's probably something you should consider, because a rental is going to be kind of spendy for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Number 2, like warranty rate. Everybody's got warranties. I don't care if you're building, DVD players, Blu-ray players, or trucks, injectors, whatever. Everything has a warranty rate. And I would say number 3, like generally speaking, how will this perform in my application? Do us all a favor. Don't prescribe your own size injector and then call the injector company and then complain about it because you and the tuner can't turn it down. Ask. I always like to know, like, what one of the first things is turbocharger. And the reason for that, if you call me and say you want enough injector for 1,000 or 800 horsepower, and I go, oh, okay, cool. And then I build you an injector big enough to do it. And you call me back 3 days later, all hot and bothered because, your motor's melted. And I go, man, that we've done these injectors 2,000 times. What size turbo you got? And then you tell me it's stock. Now it's too little, too late. You may not have known better, but I didn't care to ask either. So when we sell injectors, we try and give it percentage over, how much horsepower they'll support. We try and give everybody, so no matter what language you speak, we're trying to give you enough information that it gets you in the path of where you need to be. So, I mean, those would be the 3 things that I would kind of focus on is, reliability of the product. So that would be like, warranty rate, and then ship ability. Is it going to ship or is it not? That's something that that's caused us some grief. Inventory was triple at one point what it normally is comfortably, but that's okay because we sold all of them several times over. And then just making sure you get the right size stuff. Like tuners today are really good, but you can't tune a nozzle spray orifice smaller. So if you live in an area like Denver, where, your guys' weather is the most bipolar craziness. Like one day it's like 68 degrees and sunny, and the next day it's blowing 35 degrees, it's 32 degrees and snowing, and the next day it's back to 68 and sunny. Like, you don't really want to. And then what's the elevation in Denver? Like 5,500 feet in town, isn't it?
Yeah, like 52, 5,300, depending on.
So a tuner lives in South Carolina or Florida or Seattle, somewhere at sea level, and he's used to driving vehicles at sea level. And he tells you, living in Denver, to go buy a set of 200% overs to make 1,000 horsepower. It's not the right call. You live in Denver. You should use more pressure and more microseconds than what a 200% is going to require. But you should use something down around 100% over, because when you cold start it and when you drive around town Denver, going from stoplight to stoplight, the holes are smaller, the injectors are going to be smaller, they're going to act better on the street. You drive down to sea level with that same vehicle and it's going to be lickety split, like ultra fast responsive. You won't even believe it's the same truck. To where, like, if a guy's in Florida or in Seattle or in, say Sacramento, some places closer to sea level, you can fudge injector sizing a little bit and get away with it because the air quality is so much better. Yeah. But, you got a 40-yard sprinter in Sacramento versus one at Denver. It's a little different deal, right?
Yeah, that's what makes it tough with the kind of the cookie cutter power recipes is they don't all apply, and that's what's so cool about doing podcasts and being able to chat with you about this stuff is it gets us thinking. What are the questions I need to ask? What are the things I should focus on? Am I going to be asked, hey, what elevation are you at, or where do you normally race, or do you travel everywhere? Are you a hot shotter and you're seeing tons of variables, but yeah, I think that'll definitely help people kind of ask the right questions. It's like I said, I don't know the right things to ask, and just being able to think about that when I'm calling around or asking places, no matter what type of product it is incredibly helpful. So it's always cool to catch up with you and see what you're doing. It's like I said, there's fans that you have that are on the podcast, so, are always asking me, when's Lenny coming back on? Ask him this question. I'm thinking about injectors. Ask him this one, and stuff. So that's a really cool part of it.
And it's flattering because, like, honestly, I'm just an average cat that wakes up and gets it done and tries. But I've always enjoyed my industry, like this whole industry, whether it's listening to people, chant about whatever they believe is to be correct or what have you. A lot of things that people blurt out, like on the forums, they think it's correct, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. And I'm always going to say, like, with disclaimer, today I'm going to tell you this and this as fact. Tomorrow my facts may change because we do some more testing, we do some more research, and we find that nothing in this the dynamics of performance is never going to be like, I guess there's some certain physics that are always going to be the same. But the more you test, the more you learn, the more you change. And our recipes, we're constantly, it's not even worth trying to update people. I guess example is our like 100 to 100 and it's either right at, no, it's 100. So VP44 injectors, 100 horsepower and bigger. We're now using a sack type nozzle, and we EDM them to a 6-hole. And they've got a DLC coated needle valve, and everything like 75 horse on down, we're still using basically just a P820 tip that we modify. And the reason for that is because, like, when you go to 100 horsepower and then go bigger, VP44 gets super smoky, right? So we just figured out that we didn't have to have them smoky if we just threw all the nozzles off to the side, started over, and then made our own. And now that we can burn our hole within 1/10 of a thou, and then we choose, to get our K factor just the way it is, we can make 100 horsepower, 125, 200 horsepower injectors pretty damn smoke free. But you're not going to do that on a P820 tip. It's not going to work. I've tried it for years. You're not going to get it all out. So, but you can't really update people with that, because if we did that, the amount of bulletins would be 3 a week. There'd be so many of them. And then somebody calls up and goes, hey man, I'm working with this tuner, or I've got this Quadzilla box and it doesn't run right. Okay, well, now we got to rethink why and where you're at and what you're doing with your truck. And then we may have to edit our recipe a little bit again. So we're constantly moving stuff, but it's exciting. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, I think, like the way you built injectors, in 2009 or 10 or 12 or 13 is going to be vastly different than now. It's going to be like that in the future. So, next year you might be something completely different that you're doing. But I think, just see the cutting edge of it is what really has me excited. And I always look forward to, doing the next episode, because there's new questions or new things I see that you guys post on Instagram or Facebook. And it's just really cool to see that innovation and what you're doing with Dynomite Diesel Products. So I appreciate you chatting with me again today and giving us some really great info and answering some of those questions that I know our listeners have. And I'll be keeping my eye out for some updates, things you guys are working on.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it, Patrick. Thank you for having me on, and we'll catch you later.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to our Discord. You're going to find a link down below on YouTube, or if you search the Diesel Podcast on Instagram, we got a link right there in our bio. There's a lot of great content that you guys asked for, a lot of awesome questions and builds. Want to see you guys over there. I also want to give a shout out to a couple of our Patreon sponsors, Kaleb, Wrights Diesel Services, Texas Diesel Supply. We appreciate their support, all of our other Patreon support, and everyone who has listened to us throughout the years, going back to January 2016, the people who subscribe to our Instagram, our YouTube channel, our Facebook, the questions you guys send us, whether you're a truck owner, a shop, a company. We love hearing from you guys and appreciate your support. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.